Oh my goodness, it's cold out here. But this snowy scene is perfect for the opera that I'd like to talk to you about today. Puccini's great opera, La Bohème, which starts on one cold and snowy evening in December. It's too cold to tell you about it out here. Come on, follow me. So, La Bohème was written by the great Italian composer Giacomo Puccini. Like Carmen, the opera we looked at last week, this opera is based on a play, which in turn was based on a book, Scènes de la vie bohème, by a writer called Henri Murger. The book tells the story of a group of friends who live in the Latin Quarter of Paris in the 1830s, so nearly 200 years ago. The Latin Quarter was where all the artistic people lived. Poets, painters, musicians, philosophers, people who wanted to spend their time doing things that they loved, things that they were really excited about, but which didn't always pay very much money. These people were known as bohemians, hence the title. Puccini's opera is loosely based on Murger's book, though as the book didn't really have much of a plot, a lot of the script of the opera was made up by Puccini's librettists. Now, the words that are used in an opera and set to music by the composer are called the libretto. So the people who write that are called librettists. In this case, they were called Luigi Illica and Giuseppe Giacosa. Puccini liked working with them, and they wrote the libretti for most of his successful operas. When Puccini started work on La Bohème, he was already an established and successful composer with a big hit under his belt called Manon Lescaut. At the same time that Puccini was working on his La Bohème, another well-known composer called Ruggiero Leoncavallo was also working on his version. Leoncavallo said that he had started first, and that meant that Puccini should stop. Puccini said that he wasn't bothered what Leoncavallo thought, and said that if there were two operas of the same story, the public would decide which was the best. And that is exactly what they did. Puccini's La Bohème is one of the most performed operas ever written, and nobody has really ever heard of Leoncavallo's version. Poor Leoncavallo. Though he did have some great success with other operas, so don't feel too sorry for him. Puccini's La Bohème had its first performance, its premiere, in Turin on the 1st of February 1896. Again, rather like Carmen, the audience were not really ecstatic in their response. Some critics loved it, some didn't. However, again, like Carmen, it became more and more popular. Within a few months, it was being performed all over Italy. Within a year, it had reached England and America. And it has been performed all over the world ever since, too many times to count. The Metropolitan Opera in New York alone have given over 1,200 performances. This is an opera about following your dreams, about being young and being in love, and also about how quickly things can change. The first act opens in a tiny flat, right at the top of a shabby building in that part of Paris where all the artists live that I mentioned a moment ago. Do you remember? The Latin Quarter. It's Christmas Eve, and it's freezing. Marcello is an artist, and he's working on a painting of a part of the story of Moses from the Bible, the bit where the Red Sea is parted. It's not going well. His best friend Rodolfo is a poet and writer, and he's hard at work too. But it's not going well for him either. The problem is that it's just too cold. The other problem is that because they are poor bohemians, they have no money to buy wood for the fire, or buy food, or pay rent. Listen to the opening scene in which they come up with a rather novel way of warming themselves. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes? Yes?
I think the composer would want us to feel the cold here. Show me cold.
I wish I painted something much less wintry.
wench, a pharaoh I will drown. And you, look how the smoke is lazily floating up from the stoves all over Paris. And yet that stove beside us does nothing more to earn an honest living than lying idleness just like a lord. It's a very long time since we paid his lawful wages in the forest so white under the snow. Rodolphe, let me tell you a thought that overwhelms me. I'm simply frozen, and I, Marcello, to be quite candid, have no faith in the sweat on my forehead. All my fingers are frozen, just as if they'd been touching that iceberg, touching that block of marble, the heart of Rosetta. Love's a stove that squanders a lot of fuel too quickly, where the man does the burning and the woman the lighting, as the one turns to ash, the other stands and watches. But meanwhile here we're freezing and we're dying of hunger. We must have a fire. I have it. This chair will be our salvation. Eureka! You found it? Yes. When genius is wakened, ideas come burst and furious. We'll burn the Red Sea. No, think of the smell it would make here. But my drama, my beautiful drama, will keep us warm. You're not going to read it. I'm freezing. Oh, the paper in flames will be burning. The soul to its heaven returning. Great loss, but the world yet must bear it. For Rome is in peril. Well said. Let's start with the first act. Good. Tear it and light it. How cheerful the blaze! How cheerful the blaze!
As they burn Rodolfo's play, their friend Colline, who is a philosopher, comes in. He's grumpy because he's not been able to sell any of his philosophy books. He joins Marcello and Rodolfo as they warm themselves around the burning play script, but sadly it isn't a very long play, so the fire quickly goes out. At that moment, in bursts the fourth Bohemian friend who shares this tiny flat, Schaunard, the musician. Now these four, Rodolfo, Marcello, Schaunard and Colline, are such close friends that they're known locally as the Four Musketeers. For now I'm going to refer to them as the Bohemian Boys. Schaunard has had some success though, and he's earned quite a bit of money. A strange English gentleman has employed him to play to his pet parrot until it died. Weird. Schaunard needs the money, so he accepts, and he plays to the parrot for 3 whole days, until, with the help of a little bit of poison, the parrot dies. His friends can hardly wait to get at the food and drink that Schaunard has brought in, but Schaunard tells them that they must wait, because it is Christmas Eve. So he's going to take them all out for dinner to their favourite restaurant, the Café Momus. Just as they're preparing to leave, there's a knock at the door. Who is it? It's the landlord, Benoit, and he's come for the rent, which, to be honest, they haven't paid for several months. Marcello takes charge of the situation and invites Benoit in to join them for a drink, showing him the money that Schaunard has just earned. His friends soon catch on that he has a plan and they play along. The Bohemian boys, Marcello, Rodolfo, Colline and Schaunard, give Benoit lots to drink and they encourage him to talk. Marcello says that he's seen Benoit out one night in a bar with a pretty girl. Benoit's a bit embarrassed to begin with, but with another drink inside him and some impressed encouragement from the boys, he opens up and confesses that he has a pretty girlfriend. And also a wife. Now, this is exactly what the Bohemian boys needed. They pretend to be shocked and disgusted by Benoit's unfaithfulness to his wife, and they throw him out of the flat before he knows what's happened, and before he has had chance to collect the rent money. With Benoit gone, the boys can now head off to the Café Momus. But Rodolfo says he's not going to come along quite yet. He's writing an article for a new magazine, and he wants to get it finished before he goes out. The other Bohemian boys head off down the rickety stairs and out into the freezing cold night. Left on his own, Rodolfo is lacking inspiration in his writing when there's another knock at the door. Really? Can't a poor writer get some peace? Rodolfo opens it, and who does he see but the pretty girl from downstairs that he's been aware of but never had the courage to speak to. He asks her in, and she explains that her candle has blown out and that she has no means of relighting it. Rodolfo is only too glad to help. But suddenly she faints. He helps her to a chair and he gives her a glass of wine. When she feels better, she says that she really must go. But then, would you believe it, she says she's lost her key. Yeah, right.
A sudden draught blows out both their candles, so they're plunged into darkness. As they fumble around, Rodolfo finds her key, but he puts it in his pocket because he's already decided he'd like to spend more time with this girl.
Their hands touch in the dark, and Rodolfo takes hers in his and comments on how cold it is. He then sings to her of his life as a poet. In return, she sings to him about her life. She sews and embroiders and makes and repairs clothes. All her friends call her Mimi, but she says that she doesn't really know why, because her real name is Lucia. Strange. Anyway, with the candles lit again, Mimi finishes singing. But before Rodolfo can make another move, there's a commotion from outside. It's Rodolfo's friends, the other Bohemians, come back to tell him to get a move on. He tells them that he is with someone and that he'll be along in a moment. Wolf whistling, they head off to the Café Momus. Rodolfo turns to look at Mimi and sees her bathed in moonlight. She's so beautiful. And he knows straight away that he's fallen completely in love with her. She looks back at this handsome, penniless poet, and she knows that she's fallen in love with him too. As they head out to join Marcello, Schaunard and Colline at the Café Momus, they sing a beautiful duet. A duet is like an aria, a word we met last week, but it's for two people. They sing a duet about their newfound love. It's a magical end to Act 1. Act 2 explodes into life, with Christmas Eve at the Café Momus in full flow. There are people bustling around everywhere on the streets, children wanting to buy toys, stalls selling food, and all kinds of other people selling, well, all kinds of other things. With their newfound wealth, Colline buys a second-hand overcoat, and Schaunard a second-hand trumpet. Poor Marcello, he's feeling bitter. Rodolfo seems to have met a girl, and he is reminded that he and his girlfriend, Musetta, have broken up. Anyway, they take their table at Café Momus, and Rodolfo and Mimi come and join them. On the way there, he has bought her a pretty little hat. He proudly introduces Mimi to his friends, and with Marcello still looking sad and grumpy, they place their orders. Poor Marcello. Things get even worse for him when Musetta, his ex-girlfriend, actually turns up in Café Momus with her new man, a wealthy but old and rather boring town official called Alcindoro. She notices Marcello. Marcello notices her. But both pretend that they haven't noticed each other to wind each other up. To try to get Marcello's attention, Musetta embarrasses Alcindoro by getting up and singing her famous waltz song about what life is like for her as a beautiful woman walking down the street and being admired by men wherever she goes. She succeeds in embarrassing Alcindoro, who keeps trying to tell her to save it for later. But Marcello continues to pretend that he hasn't noticed her. She smashes a plate, she throws food, all no good. In desperation, she screams out that her foot is agony because the heel of her shoe has broken. She tells Alcindoro that he has to go and get her a replacement from a nearby cobbler. As Marcello sees that she has got rid of her unwanted and now ex-boyfriend, he finally cottons on to the fact that she must still love him just as he still loves her. As Alcindoro faithfully trots off to find the cobbler, Marcello stands up and sings the Puccini equivalent of a power ballad about how happy he is that Musetta still loves him. As they get back together, honestly, get a room, Schaunard tries to pay the bill, but realises that someone must have picked his pocket. Either that or he dropped his wallet. Whatever, he has no money. In a moment of inspiration, Musetta asks for the boy's bill and adds it to Alcindoro's, so that when he comes back from the cobbler's, he has to pay for his own dinner and for that of the Bohemian boys. Off the hook once more, the Bohemian boys with Mimi and Musetta slip out of Café Momus and join the crowds of Christmas Eve revellers, just as the interval arrives and the audience slip out for a drink. When we come back from the interval, it's no longer cheerful, bright Christmas Eve. It's a freezing cold February day. And we are now out on the edge of the city by one of the city gates, where there is a little pub in which Marcello and Musetta are living. Marcello paints signs for the inn, and Musetta can be heard in the background giving some group singing lessons to all the people in the pub. Mimi appears, but boy, she doesn't look well. She's looking for Marcello, so somebody goes to summon him from the pub. He comes out, and she begs him to help her to sort things out with Rodolfo. He's been acting so strangely, getting very angry and very jealous. And things got so bad that just last night, he left her. Marcello says that he is happy with his life in the pub with Musetta, but he agrees to have a word with his friend Rodolfo. But Mimi's coughing. She can't seem to stop. And she looks so weak and so ill. Mimi slips round the corner of the pub and hides as Rodolfo comes out looking for his friend. When Marcello asks him about Mimi, Rodolfo at first claims that they've broken up because she's always flirting with other men. Marcello knows Mimi, though, and he knows that while Musetta might do that, Mimi wouldn't. And he tells Rodolfo. Rodolfo then bursts into tears and confesses that the real reason he broke up with Mimi is because he's so worried about her. She has this terrible cough, which he thinks is an awful illness. And he's a penniless poet, and he can't afford to pay for any treatment for her. She would be much better, he thinks, with a rich boyfriend who might be able to pay for medicine that could save her life. Mimi's crying and coughing give her away. And as Rodolfo rushes to her, knowing that she has overheard all that he has just said, Marcello hears Musetta giggling naughtily from inside the pub. Now, he really is jealous. He's not just pretending. So he goes to find out what she's up to. Left alone, Mimi and Rodolfo realise they just can't bear to be apart. They gaze into each other's eyes, and they agree to stay together, at least until the spring. In the spring, the weather is warmer. And if it seems then that they should not be together, at least the sun will be out, so it'll be easier to be alone. As they sing again a beautiful duet about their love for each other and how they are going to stay together for now, Marcello and Musetta storm out of the pub. She's been flirting with other men again, and he has had enough. He, on the other hand, is a stubborn ox who never has any fun. Mimi and Rodolfo are back on. And Marcello and Musetta are definitely not. As Act 4 starts, we found ourselves back in the little flat at the top of the block in the Latin Quarter, where we were in Act 1. It's the summer, so at least it's warmer. And Rodolfo and Marcello come in, talking about their respective, now ex-girlfriends. Honestly, can't they talk about anything else? It's worse than Made in Chelsea. Anyway, it seems that both Musetta and Mimi have got themselves wealthy boyfriends. Marcello has seen Mimi and Rodolfo has seen Musetta. Both Bohemian boys pretend that they don't care about their ex-girlfriends, but they do. They care a lot. Listen.
In a coupe, carriage and pair, she greeted me so gaily. Well, Musetta, I asked her, how's your heart? Not beating, or I don't feel it. Thanks to this velvet that covers it, delighted to hear it. Delighted to hear it. You can't fool me. You're fretting and fuming. It's silent. Bravo. And guess who I saw? Musetta. Me, you saw her. How curious. Out in a carriage, a maid in splendor, just like a duchess. Delightful, I'm glad to hear it. You lie pining with love. Back to work, back to work. This pen is useless, the old paintbrush.
Rodolfo and Marcello remember that, miss their girlfriends though they do, they are also starving. Fortunately, at that moment, in bursts Schaunard, followed by Colina. Schaunard has again succeeded in bringing home some food, this time, sadly, just one small fish for them all to share. Apparently, this moment in the opera is a real event from Puccini's life, when he, in his early years, was a penniless composer and he and his friends had to live off very little food, including, for one meal, between four of them, a pickled herring. As the Bohemian boys make a huge fuss and a joke about this enormous meal, Musetta rushes in and the mood changes in a flash from the boys joking together to a life and death situation. Musetta has found Mimi out in the street. Mimi has left her rich boyfriend, and knowing in herself that she's very, very ill, she just wants to see Rodolfo again, because it's him that she truly loves. As Mimi is helped into the flat and made as comfortable as possible, it is clear to everyone that she is very ill indeed. Well, they need some medicine, but they've got no money. Musetta decides that she can sell her earrings to get money for medicine, and she and Marcello head off to see what they can do. Colline decides that he can help by selling his coat, so he leaves. And as he does so, he suggests to Schaunard that he should leave Rodolfo and Mimi alone together. You see, the Bohemian boys have all become very fond of Mimi. They're all worried about her because they all care. Left alone in the room together, Mimi and Rodolfo remember the first night they met, here in this very room. How the candles went out and how they lost the key. Rodolfo shows her the little hat that he bought her as they went to the Café Mormuse that snowy Christmas Eve. He's kept it close to him ever since she left. Mimi is suddenly overtaken by a fit of terrible coughing, which brings a concerned Schaunard back in. You see, Schaunard has seen this illness before. In the 1830s, they called it consumption. Today, we might call it tuberculosis. As Mimi drifts off to sleep, Schaunard knows what's going to happen. Musetta and Marcello come back. They have succeeded in selling Musetta's earrings, and they have some medicine. As Marcello prepares it, Musetta says a prayer for poor Mimi. As we hear one of the most famous chords in opera, Schaunard realizes that Mimi is dead, and he whispers the news to Marcello. Colline returns from selling his coat, and he asks how Mimi is doing. Rodolfo assures him that she's getting better, that the sleep will do her good. Then he realizes that all his friends are looking at him, and that Mimi is not moving. As he rushes to her and holds her in his arms, calling out her name, the curtain falls, and the opera ends. Woo! What an emotional roller coaster. But what does it mean? What are we, an audience, supposed to get from this? I asked a man who knows, our friend, the producer. This opera tells us to hold the people we love close to us. You never know what's around the corner. You never know when things are going to change. So hold on to the people you love now. That's the message of La Bohème. People should see this opera and come away thinking about life differently. That's what opera does. It's not just singing and frilly costumes and makeup. It gets into your heart and it changes your life. I couldn't have put it better myself. Please join me again next week when we go back in time 100 years to Vienna in 1896 to the work of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You might have heard of him. No quick tour of opera would be complete without a Mozart opera. And we will look at one of his best known, Le Nozze di Figaro, The Marriage of Figaro. Bye for now.